Hey Sue besties, welcome back. Today's video is an extremely detailed video about how to draft a notched collar kimono jacket. Some people call this a lapel collar jacket. This video is going to be in two parts. In the first part, I'll be showing you how to draft your pattern and how to alter it to get your notched collar. In the second part, we'll be transferring our pattern to fabric and we're also going to be sewing. If you think this video is going to add value to you, please give this video a thumbs up. Also, do not forget to subscribe and turn on the bell notification icon so you will know when I post a new video. If you're ready just like I am, let's get started.
So at the top here, I have my starting point line, which I'm also going to be calling my shoulder line. This is just a starting point, and above the line, you notice I have some space upwards here. I'm going to be needing this space when I draft my notched collar. It's going to come in handy, so watch out for when I'll start drafting my notched collar. Next, I have a starting point line also here on the left side of my pattern paper, and this I have labeled CB, which is my center back. This is a starting point from the left side of my paper. And on the other side of my paper, you will notice I have a line which I have called CF. So to get my CF, what I simply did was I took my largest circumference measurement, which is my hip circumference. I divided it by 2 and I added 2 inches to it. And what I got, I measured from my center back to my center front. So that's how I got this space in between my center back and my center front. And I also have a line here in the middle. So this line is simply dividing this space into 2 equal halves. Okay, so I measure what I have here, which I told you is the circumference around the fullest part of my body, which is a hip. In this case, it could be the bust for you. And I divided what I have by 2 and added 2 inches to it. So that value, I further divided it into 2, and that is what I have on both sides here. So this is my back panel and this is my front panel. Now I also have some horizontal lines which I'm going to explain how I came about them. Here I have my shoulder to bust line. This is simply the measurement from your shoulder to the fullest part of your bust. I also have my shoulder to waistline, which is this line right here. And as you would notice on the back, I also have a waistline as well, shoulder to waistline as well. But you would notice a difference between the back shoulder to waist and the front shoulder to waist. My front shoulder to waist is 19 inches and my back shoulder to waist is 16. You can simply watch any of my videos on how to draft a basic bodice block. There I'm going to explain why your front shoulder to waist and your back shoulder to waist is different. So in this case, the difference between my front shoulder to waist and my back shoulder to waist is 3 inches. For you, it could be 1 inch, it could be 2 inches, as the case may be. I also have my shoulder to hip line. This is the distance from your shoulder to the fullest part of your hip or your bum. So for me, it is 28. And for the back, I've also subtracted the same 3 inches difference which I have for my waistline. So whatever difference you get on your waistline, your front waistline and your back waistline, you maintain that difference on your hip line, and as the case may be. For the hemline, the distance from the shoulder to the length of our kimono jacket, which is 40 inches for the front. So I subtracted 3 inches as well for the back. So my shoulder to the hemline for the back, this is the hemline for the back, is 37. So that is how I got all the lines of this paper. So let's jump into drafting our pattern.
First, I start by marking out my back neckline. The width of my back neckline is 3 inches and the depth is half of an inch. I mark this out by using the straight and curved part of my ruler. After I have achieved this, I move to the front panel of my pattern. Here I am marking out only the neck width, which is 3 inches. Next, I divide my shoulder width by 2 and I mark the value on the back and front panel. My shoulder width is 14 divided by 2 and it gives me 7. I'm going to be marking this in front and also at the back, just as you can see me doing. Next, just below where I have my shoulder width measurement, I'm going to be marking my shoulder slope. My shoulder slope for the back is 1 inch and for the front it is going to be 1.5 inches. So come down by 1 inch for the back shoulder slope and 1.5 inches for the front shoulder slope. Next, I'll be connecting from where I marked my back neck width to where I have my back shoulder slope, and also from where I have my front neck width to where I have my front shoulder slope. The next thing I need to do at this point is to mark my armhole, and to get this I will be dividing my bust measurement divided by 6, and then I'll be adding 1.5 to this, and then I'll be drawing a line with this value from the end of my shoulder slope downwards. I'm going to be making this a broken line as this is not a permanent line. At the bottom of this back armhole line, I'm going to be drawing a horizontal line all the way to the other side, that is the front panel, to where I have my front shoulder slope, and I'm just going to stop there. To get the front armhole, I am also going to draw a broken line from the front shoulder slope to touch this last horizontal line which I just drew, and that is all you have to do to get your front armhole line. Next, I'm going to find the midpoint of my back armhole line. I would mark the midpoint, on that broken line, and then on that midpoint which I've just marked, I'll be coming in by half of an inch, just as you can see me doing. Next, I'll be using the straight side of my ruler to connect from the top of my armhole line all the way to where I have the half of an inch mark, and then I'm going to be using the curved side of my ruler to complete the armhole curve, and that is my back armhole. I would also be doing the same thing for my front armhole curve. I'll find the midpoint of my armhole line, mark it on the broken line, but this time around I'll be going in by 0.75 of an inch, or what we would call 3/4 of an inch. So for the front armhole, we're going to be using 3/4 of an inch or 0.75, not 0.5 as we used for the back. I'm also going to be drawing a line from my front shoulder slope to the 0.75 mark, and then I'm also going to use the curved side of my ruler to complete the armhole curve for the front. And that is all for our back and front armhole curves. Next, I'm going to be extending the line I have at the bottom of my armhole curves. I'm going to be extending this line only at the back, and this line is going to be called my chest line. I'm just going to label this line CH. Next, using a straight ruler, I'm just going to trace this midpoint on my back armhole. I'm going to be tracing it on my center back line. I'll be needing this point for my back contour, marking 1 inch on my back waistline away from my center back. Next, I'm going to be connecting these 3 points which you can see me touching with a straight ruler. The point where I traced from my back armhole, the point where I marked 1 inch on my back waistline, and then to the center back side of my hip line. These are the 3 points I connected. Just watch what I'm doing carefully so that you can understand. Next, we'll be working on our darts. To work on our darts, we'll be needing our bust span measurement. To get your bust span measurement, simply divide your bust by 4 and then subtract 1.5. That will give you your bust span. And then to use that figure to get your darts, you're going to have to divide it by 2. So my bust span is 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. So I've gone ahead to mark these 4 inches on my chest line, waist line, hip line, and the hemline. Next, I'm connecting this point with a broken line all the way to the hemline, as this is not a permanent line. Note that when marking your bust span divided by 2, you start marking from your center back line. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the waistline, and on the place where I have this broken line, I'm going to be marking half of an inch on both sides of the broken line. And then where I have my hip line, I'll be coming up by 2 inches from the hip line. Next, I'm going to be connecting all these 4 points like this, from the chest line to the 2 points on the waistline, and then to the point where I came up by 2 inches on the hip line. And that is exactly how to create the darts for your back panel. Now coming to the front panel, I'm also going to be marking the same 4 inches on my bust line this time around, because I do not have a chest line on the front panel. 4 inches on the waistline as well, starting from the center front. 4 inches on the hip line, starting from the center front. 4 inches on the hemline as well. And then I'm going to be using a straight ruler to connect this, just as I did for the back. Sorry, I forgot to use a broken line for the front, but do not forget to use a broken line on yours to avoid having too many lines on your pattern. So next thing I'm going to do is I'll be coming down by 1 inch from my bust point. I'll be moving away by half of an inch on both sides of the waistline here. You can use 0.75 if you like, and then on this hip line I'll be coming up by 2 inches as well. So now I'll be using a straight ruler to connect all these 4 points which I just marked, just as I did for the back. Remember, come down by 1 inch from the bust point, move away by half of an inch or 0.75. I actually used 0.75 on the waistline, and then come up by 2 inches on the hip line. Then connect all the 4 points, and that is your front dart. Next, I'm going to be imputing my body measurement. So I'll start with the bust measurement, bust circumference divided by 4. I mark that on the chest line. Take note of the chest line, not the bust line. So now I'm going to also add half of an inch for ease. I'm also going to divide my waist measurement by 4, and I'm going to mark that on the waistline here. Then I'm going to measure what I have on my dart, and I'm going to add it also. And then I'll also add that half of an inch for ease. Next, also on the hip line, I'll divide my hip circumference by 4, and I'll mark that here. And I'm also going to add the half of an inch for ease. So now I'm going to take my straight ruler, and I'm going to be connecting all the points where I marked my body measurement plus the allowance for ease. I'll be using a hip curve ruler to connect from the waist to where I have my hip line, and then I would use a straight ruler to connect from the hip line all the way to the hemline. We added half of an inch for ease because a kimono jacket is not supposed to be a tight fitting garment, so you do not want to forget to add this allowance for ease. Next, we'll be moving to our back panel. Please note that this contour line is our new center back line, so I'm going to be marking it CB, and we'll be taking our measurements from there. So on the chest line, bust divided by 4, and I'll add half of an inch for ease. And also waist circumference divided by 4, starting from the new center back, remember, and I'll add the dots, and also half of an inch for ease. And also for the hip line, I'm also going to divide the hip circumference by 4 plus our half of an inch for ease, and then I'm just going to connect it just the way I did for the front panel. Now we have all our body measurements correctly imputed on our pattern, and now it is time to add a bust dart to the front panel. I'll be taking the difference between my front and back length, which is 3 inches, and then I'll mark it here just like this from my bust line downwards. Next, I'll be connecting from this point straight up to my bust point with a straight line, and then I'll measure what I have on this line and I'll be transferring it to the line above, just as you can see me doing. Next, I will want to find the midpoint of my bust dart, and to do this, I'll simply measure from the last part where I marked the point to the lower line, and then I'll just mark the midpoint here. Next, I would draw a broken line from the bust point all the way to this midpoint which I have marked, and I'm going to extend that broken line outside the pattern, just as you can see me doing. Next, we would have to adjust the sides of our pattern. I'll be drawing a line from the front armhole all the way down to this broken line which I have here, and then also I would also draw a line from that broken line to the lower bust dart line, and that will be all you would have to do for your bust dart. If you do not understand what I just said, just replay this part and carefully watch the steps. Next, we are going to be creating shoulder princess dart seams for both the front and the back. To do this, we are going to be dividing what we have here on the shoulder line by 2, and then we'll mark the midpoint and then connect it to the darts which we previously created. I'm doing this on the back shoulder line as well as on the front shoulder line. For the back, I'm connecting this all the way to the chest line, and for the front panel, I'll be connecting this from the midpoint on the shoulder line all the way to the bust line. And this is all you have to do to convert your darts to shoulder princess darts. Next thing I have to do is to cut out everything about my back panel and then set it aside while I continue to work on my front panel. Please watch carefully as I cut so you know the right lines to cut and which lines to cut first. If you have watched this video to this point, it means you have gotten value from it. Please give this video a thumbs up so that many more people can get to see this video. Also, if you know anyone who might be interested in watching this video, please kindly use the share button to send them a link to this video. Now I'll also go ahead to cut the sides of my front panel. Please watch carefully as I cut so you know the right lines to cut. Next, I'll go ahead to create my notched collar. I need you to watch carefully so you know the measurements to use. First, I start by marking out my button allowance. For my button allowance, I am going to be using 1 inch. You could use between 1 and 1.5 depending on what you are trying to achieve. I mark this 1 inch on my shoulder line, my bust line, my waistline, hip line, as well as the hemline. Next, I went ahead to use the straight side of my ruler to connect all these points where I marked the 1 inch for my button allowance. Next, I went ahead to choose a break point. The break point is simply where you want your notched collar to start, and I chose to start my notched collar from the waistline. Next, I went ahead to draw a line connecting from this break point all the way to where I have my neck width measurement, which I imputed earlier on, and I extended it beyond this line upwards, as you can see me doing. Next, I picked up my back panel and I measured what I had around the neckline. Here I am just taking my time to measure it several times to make sure I get an accurate figure, and then I go ahead to set it aside and I impute the value which I have measured from the neckline on this line here. This line you see me tapping, I'm just going to mark what I got. Next, from that point which I just marked, I'm going to come out by half of an inch, and then I'm going to mark it just beside the line here, just like this. Next, I'm going to pick up a curved ruler, and then I'm going to connect from this half of an inch mark back to the side of my neckline for the front. Next, using my straight ruler, I draw a line from this last curved line which I just drew at an angle of 45 degrees. And I would like the width of this line to be 3.5 inches. So I will just mark 3.5 inches from where I started the line. Next, I measure from my shoulder line downwards and I mark 6 inches. At this point where I mark 6 inches, I use my straight ruler to draw a broken line. This broken line is basically just going to serve as a guide or a reference point. So from the broken line, I'll just come up by 1 inch. I'm going to mark that here, as you can see me doing. Now from this 1 inch mark, I'm going to use my straight ruler to connect from that 1 inch mark point to the other end of my broken line. I'm going to be starting this line off as a broken line because the beginning part is going to be a guide also, but I'm going to end it up as a straight solid line. So using the curved ruler and the guides I created earlier, I'm just going to draw a curve here and complete it with my straight ruler. Now, starting from where I have my button allowance, I'll be measuring 3 inches outwards and I'll just mark it like this. And then using either a straight or curved ruler, I'm just going to connect from this point to my break point. I'll be using a curved ruler because I like the effect it gives. It's all coming together nicely already. So right now I'm just going to come to the top here and I'm going to mark 1.5 inches here, and then I'm also going to come to the top just like this, and I'm going to mark 1.25. Just come up from the edge here and mark 1.25. Now we're going to be connecting these 2 points which I just drew, the 1.5 inch mark and the 1.25. So now using a straight ruler, I'm just going to connect these 2 points, and after which I would use a curved ruler just like this, not too curved, to connect these 2 points just the way I'm doing. If you do not understand what I explained, just watch what I'm doing, you will get it. And this is basically all you need to do to create your notched collar. So I'm just going to be shading off the part I would need to cut off from the notched collar, because this upper part or this last part which I created needs to be cut out. So just watch me as I cut it so you would know how to cut yours as well. I'm also going to be cutting the rest of my kimono jacket, so just watch carefully as I cut so you know what to cut and how to cut it. I would also need to close up my post dart, and in order to do this I would have to first cut out all the excess paper I have all around the pattern. I would also need to slash through the shoulder darts and cut out the darts before closing up the side darts. In order to fold in my post dart, I start by folding in the center line, and then I proceed to fold in the other lines. Just watch carefully as I do. I'm going to be ending this process by securing the fold with glue. You could use tape if you like. Just watch carefully and follow the steps. Also watch carefully to see how I will be cutting the back panel into two halves as well, the center back part and the side back part. Thank you so much for watching this video up to this point. If you want to watch the second part of this video where I'll be transferring this pattern to fabric, please subscribe and also hit the bell notification icon so that you will be notified as soon as I post it. I will also link the second part of this video in the comments so you can easily locate it and watch it. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to put it down in the comment section and I will be available to answer your questions.